The United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization says, modern business farming is responsible for loss of farmers' traditional crop varieties. The green revolution of the 20th century changed agriculture. Some experts say the use of modern commercial farming methods saved millions of people from starvation. Farmers planted, watered, and fertilized their crops with the help of machines. The main cause of heart attacks and strokes are blockages in blood vessels. These prevent blood from flowing to the heart or the brain. The most common reason for these blockages is a buildup of fatty deposits on the inner walls of the arteries. When you feel stressed or under pressure, your body releases many natural hormones including adrenaline and cortisol. Groups of men formed large companies and began buying land in the area. The large companies used huge machines to dig for gold. One of these companies continued to make a profit digging gold until 1966. History records say that in only 4 years the area around Dawson produced more than $51 million in gold. Sony and Philips, another electronics manufacturer, worked together to create a new storage device for digital sound, the compact disc. The new technology had its critics, but Oger and others believed that the excellent sound quality of the CD would make it popular. Sony began producing CD recordings in 1982. One of the world's largest seed conservation projects has predicted further losses. The Millennium Seed Bank Partnership is warning that up to 100,000 plant species could permanently disappear. The rich collection of genes that decide their qualities would disappear with them. Any experts blame climate change and loss of habitat, normal growth area, for damaging plant life. Singing with others can be a way to break the cycle of loneliness. Whether it is a choir or any type of singing group, it is a way to make new friends and visit new places. Singing with others is not easy. It takes a lot of practice and offers a challenge, both physical and mental. A Swedish man named Erik Ahlström started the movement in 2016. On the World Environment Day website, Ahlström says that he moved to Stockholm from a small community in northern Sweden. Each day he would ride his bike to work. He says he became concerned about the amount of trash and litter he saw each day on his way to work. European officials avoided one financial crisis recently. Greece reached a deal with other European countries to meet its short-term loan obligations last week. The Greek government is expected to begin negotiations on a 3-year plan, valued at over $90 billion, to deal with its international debt. The group says 22 countries are currently in a debt crisis. Financial markets around the world have shown increased volatility in recent weeks, in part, influenced by events in China. Indexes for stock exchanges in Japan, Hong Kong, and South Korea have all shown volatility. And share prices in major European indexes in Britain, Germany and France have decreased in the last month. Volkswagen is Europe's largest automaker. The company did not say which cars were affected, reported the Wall Street Journal. Industry analysts said cars sold in Europe were probably affected. The US government said Monday that Volkswagen cheated on emissions tests. The Associated Press reported that Volkswagen placed software in about 10,000 cars that reported false levels of pollution. Older women who walk a little over 3 kilometers each day might live longer than less active women of the same age, a new study suggests. Many Americans hoping to stay healthy set a daily goal of 10,000 steps, or about 8 kilometers. They often have this goal because they are wearing electronic devices which set that target, note researchers in the United States. The guidelines are common-sense advice given by many other health organizations, such as the U.S. National Institute on Aging. But they are important reminders. They can help healthcare providers advise their patients on what they can do to help prevent cognitive decline and dementia. The new guidelines can also help governments and policymakers design social programs to help people lead healthy. Using digital devices to offer a service online was another way to earn income. About 2% of Americans earned money from ride-sharing companies such as Uber and Lyft. When drivers are ready to pick up passengers, they use their ride-share company's app. The computer program lets them know when passengers are ready to be picked up and how to reach them. WHO experts warn that dementia is a rapidly growing public health problem. People with dementia are often not able to care for themselves. Their need for care, the WHO adds, creates great economic problems for families and societies. Experts estimate that by the year 2030, caring for people with dementia will cost about $2 trillion, US dollar, every year. People who have repeatedly changing sleep and wake times, and get different amounts of sleep each night, are more likely to have metabolic health conditions. That is the finding of a new study. For years, lack of sleep has been linked to a wide collection of metabolic conditions, including obesity, high blood pressure, and diabetes. The aerospace company Astrobotic Technology told Reuters it expects to launch the spacecraft named Peregrine in the summer of 2021 from Florida's Cape Canaveral. The company said Peregrine will be the first American spacecraft to land on the Moon, since Apollo astronauts last touched down there in 1972. The mission will bring technology and experiments to the Moon to prepare for human flights. Tencel, also known as lyocell, is one alternative that's been around for decades on the fringes of fashion. It is made by extracting cellulose fiber from trees, and its manufacture is thought to use 95% less water than cotton processing. Very similar to cotton in feel, it forms a component of many high-street clothing items. Recently, a group of economists and mathematicians at Oxford University found convincing evidence of learning curve effects across more than 50 different products from transistors to beer, including photovoltaic cells. Sometimes the learning curve is shallow and sometimes it is steep, but it always seems to be there. In the case of PV cells, it's quite steep, for every doubling of output. India's second biggest manufacturer of commercial vehicles, Ashok Leyland, is suspending production at several units from 5 to 18 days in September, triggering fears that the slump in the automotive sector shows no sign of letting up. The BBC's Nitin Shrivastava reports. The factory he works at temporarily suspended production for half of the month to reduce inventory. Hong Kong Exchanges and Clearing said in a statement that combining the two exchanges would bring together the largest and most significant financial centers in Asia and Europe. But it wants the LSE to scrap its plans to buy data firm, Refinitiv. The deal would redefine global capital markets for decades to come, said Charles Lee, chief executive of the Hong Kong company. This is the mechanism behind the geologic activity in the Ring of Fire, the 25,000-mile perimeter of the Pacific tectonic plate, running from Southeast Asia toward Russia, Alaska, and down toward South America. The region is home to 90% of the world's earthquakes, and 75% of all volcanoes. Young children who experience the permanent separation of their parents are often faced with a number of significant changes in their lives. In some cases, these changes can have a positive effect on the children's development, yet on the other hand, the changes may negatively influence children's development. The effect separation has on children. Male drivers account for about 65% of total passenger vehicle kilometers traveled. This reflects both the fact that males are more likely to have a driver's license and that, on average, male drivers travel more each year. While males of all ages travel more than females, the difference is particularly high for those over the age of 45. Accounting software is used to collect information about and report on the financial viability of a business. This software is critical to the proper administration of an organization. Before deciding upon which software package to use, it is important to understand the different types of accounting software and under what circumstances each one should be used. The rise of the gig economy, where people accept work on a per-job basis, has spawned a swathe of mobile apps, normally putting people in touch directly with drivers or riders. But fears that tech firms like Uber or DoorDash, a food delivery company, are exploiting their scale to erode workers' rights, have caused lawmakers to look at how to protect those workers. Acting FDA Commissioner Dr. Ned Sharpless said, "If we see a migration to tobacco-flavored products by kids, we will take additional steps to address youth use of these products. E-cigarette manufacturers such as you'll have been blamed for fueling childhood addiction through flavored products such as mango, cream or cinnamon roll." Analysts have predicted devastating consequences for gig economy firms' bottom line if they are forced to reclassify workers into employees. When asked, Uber would not offer any guidance to investors over how damaging such a change would be. The firm lost just over $5.2 billion in its last reported quarter. Lyft, valued at $15 billion, lost $2.3 billion in the same period. U.S. media report the deal would involve the Sackler's exiting the company before it would file for bankruptcy, dissolve and reform. Profits from the business would then be directed to pay plaintiffs an amount thought to be around $10 billion to $12 billion, £8 billion to £10 billion, as well as donating drugs for addiction and overdose recovery, multiple reports say. Preliminary meetings are set to take place later this month in Washington, before U.S. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin and Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer meet China's Vice Premier Liu He in October. Significant U.S. exports to China, like pork, soybeans and American-made cars, are among the goods that will still be hit by the hefty taxes. It was not that we lacked confidence in our talents. Rather, it was that we were not sure we had fully acquired the necessary skills. Absorbing so much new and complex information in such a short time was challenging. Although we all found a way to pass the exams, it was impossible to know if our academic achievements would translate into success in the real world. Whatever the difficulties of the crash involvement rate measure, if it is assumed that the influence of extraneous factors has remained constant, then changes in the involvement rate over time should provide useful information about changes in crash propensity. Results indicate that both male and female rates have declined in recent years. Being organized is one thing, but the less effort it takes to be that way, the better. We're big fans of cloud software as, unlike traditional software, updates happen automatically, removing the need for constant manual upgrades or purchases. The cloud also offers users flexibility and greater transparency between accountants, bookkeepers and clients. Bananas are a staple crop for millions, and one of the world's top 10 crops, in terms of the cultivated area devoted to their growth, and the calories they provide to the global population. For the past 60 years, annual yields have been increasing by 1.37 tons a hectare as the world warms, and now stand at about 10 to 40 tons per hectare. But the bottom line is that conventional air conditioning should be a last resort, not a crutch. Perhaps the most promising thing about passive cooling, McGregor adds, is that it offers a way out of the vicious cycle we are currently stuck in with air conditioning, using a technology to keep cool that actually contributes to heating the world up. Number 1 on that list is stopping deforestation, along with efforts to regenerate degraded ecosystems. Reducing food waste is also important. More than a quarter of what the world grows to eat is never actually consumed. That creates a huge carbon footprint to no benefit. And diets themselves need to change. In particular, raising livestock contributes disproportionately to the problem. More than 80% of the former inner German border now forms part of that protected green belt. Its historical legacy has been preserved along with the plants and animals. Visitors can spot wild orchids, otters and storks, but also explore the history of the Cold War through museums, exhibitions, and guided hiking and cycling tours. This lake, near the nickel and copper smelters of the town of Sudbury, Ontario, has been radically altered by acid rain. Almost every living thing in the water, like the tiny algae that would normally block light from reaching the depths, has gone, leaving the water here and in lakes across the region a beautiful but eerily lifeless aquamarine. That Journal of the American Medical Association study found 43.6% of campaigns carried statements that were definitive or certain about the effectiveness of treatment. It's not too difficult to trace these overstated claims back to some clinics that use tokens of scientific legitimacy, published articles in journals with little or no peer review. Roofs like these are one way that architects, engineers and designers are rethinking buildings to find ways to keep them cool without air conditioning. The challenge is becoming increasingly urgent. It has been yet another scorching year, with heatwaves steamrolling Australia, Southern Asia, North America, and Europe. To deal with heatwaves, made more frequent by climate change. The undulating green roof is one of a series of engineering and design features that make the Academy one of the largest passively ventilated spaces in the US. This means that even in the peak of summer, the bulk of this building relies on clever manipulation of the elements to stay cool, with next to no air conditioning. Modern-day sloths, the three-toed sloth and the two-toed sloth, are much smaller versions of the sloths that inhabited the prehistoric world. Giant sloths, some that would weigh up to several tons, walked on the ground during the last ice age until around 11,000 years ago, foraging from the trees by standing up on their hind legs to reach into the foliage. Optimistically, the report's authors conclude that there should be enough room to provide a growing population with sufficient food, without rushing towards a dangerously warm climate. There is, though, a caveat. That outcome would require what one commentator called a global intelligent response. But the world, like the delegates, seems to be asleep. It is hard not to misread the changing rules of business when you once rewrote them, even harder when some of your oldest friends are your sounding board. It is clear that the directors have no stomach for replacing their chairman in the foreseeable future. But unless Mr. Smith brings in fresh executives, and then listens to them. When viewed from space, our planet is a blue and white jewel amid the blackness. Much of Earth's distinctive color comes from the vast amounts of water that cover the surface, scattering light from the sky above. The oceans, however, are also a crucial part of the planet's water cycle, which in turn drives the weather and climate. We all have stem cells. These are building block cells of sorts, with the ability to develop into a wide range of specialized cell types. Stem cells not only replenish our old cells, but also spring into action to repair and replace injured tissue. As a result, they have been likened to our own army of microscopic doctors, but that army is relatively small. Super forecasters have also been observed to make smaller changes to their predictions than other people when given the opportunity to revise them. It might be the case that their original estimate was already pretty accurate. When they revise their answer, they move to a slightly different response, rather than jumping wildly to a completely different solution. It may be wise to double down this way. However much risk-averse investors may prefer share buybacks to ambitious capital spending plans, halting investment could be seen as a flag of surrender by the likes of Amazon. That said, FedEx's failures to respond more quickly to the changing e-commerce landscape. A swelling human population also needs more land to feed itself. Balancing these needs, for space to grow food on the one hand, and natural carbon sinks to keep temperatures low on the other, is a huge challenge. There are, however, solutions. Recently, a report by the World Resources Institute, a multinational think tank, probably not a lot, in truth. The two big superpowers would hardly scrap their nuclear arsenals without the Chinese, Indians, Israelis and others doing the same, and how would that be verified? Still, despite the false start in Reykjavik, the negotiations continued, with the elimination of intermediate-range nuclear weapons in Europe and deep, verified cuts in the strategic arsenals on both sides. Mr. Serena's account, first published in French 3 years ago, draws on declassified archives and interviews with witnesses to paint a vivid and valuable picture of the two-day meeting in the Icelandic capital, despite the occasional redundant flourish and some unfamiliarity with the technology he mentions. He is a leading French correspondent dealing with the United States.